I'm in search of conversation guests. If you are interested or know someone that might be interested, please contact me directly. Thank you.
On yours, on the other videos, I saw everybody sitting down at the table or sitting in the screen going. I said, nah.
People are gonna find this so weird that you're laying down. All right, let's do this.
My name is Ernest Mendoza, and I work for the Department of Corrections here in the state of California from 1997 to 2014. I went to the academy in Galt near Sacramento for a 6-week academy back in November of 97 to the first 2 weeks of December of 97, and then starting the December of 1997 at Calipatria State Prison in the city of Calipat in Imperial County. I was born and raised in Imperial County, so when you apply for the Department of Corrections, usually they keep you close to home if possible, if there's an institution there. And especially since the area is kind of out in the sticks, they were definitely looking for people to work in that area because it was hard to keep people there. If they came from other big metropolitan areas, they kind of worked there until they got enough time, enough seniority that they could transfer out, and then transferred out to be where they wanted to be, which is, of course, close to home and close to where they had a lifestyle that they came from. So I started at Calipat in 97 till 2006. I took the sergeant's exam, scored first rank. Wasn't sure about promoting. I kind of started to do the interview process because people around me, the other officers that I work with, were talking about they were doing it. And the questions, I said, well, I want the experience of them going through the interview process, having them ask me questions of what I know and how that applies in a supervisory setting versus just as a correctional officer, just the doing part instead of the supervising part. So I started doing that. And the next thing you know, I started getting job offers. And I really hadn't expected to accept a promotion, but I did it anyway. So in 2006, I promoted to a sergeant, correctional sergeant at Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego County, San Diego, California, and worked there until my medical retirement due to several sustained on-duty injuries back in February of 2014. So, 8 years plus as an officer, 8 years plus as a correctional sergeant. Getting into the Department of Corrections was roughly a 1-year type of application. You applied, mailed in the paper application. It took them a while to receive all those applications, see who they would select. Then you had to go and take the written test. Once you passed that, you had to go to a physical evaluation and a medical. Once you were cleared with that, then you had to go through another interview process. And if you passed that, then you were actually slated to go to the academy and you were actually offered a position. So it took through all that to get the job of correctional officer for the state of California, for the California Department of Corrections. And that was kind of my journey getting in and my career there. What differs is the fact that with working in that environment, it's definitely has its ups and downs, it's prone to violence. And with that, I sustained several injuries. I had several surgeries, laminectomy, discectomy for a herniated disc at my L2 in 2010. Went back to work after that. 2013, another laminectomy and discectomy at my L5 lumbar. And after that, I was just determined that I was prone to injury with my back in the condition that it wasn't prudent to continue in that career anymore for the sake of getting hurt and further damage. From those injuries, even though I retired in 2014, 2019, I had a cervical fusion in my lower cervical area. I'm looking at maybe surgery for a torn rotator cuff in my left shoulder. So, it's a physically demanding career. And as such, I've seen a lot of people who did the job a lot longer than me, made it to the 30 plus years, high 20s that just, we called them dinosaurs because they've been so long working for the institution but you definitely saw the toll it took on the body. They lumbered like large dinosaurs. And that's just, the job, what it takes, and that's one of the things that they don't tell you about, is that this is one of the job that not only do you give to it, it takes from you. You can, in your physical form, mentally. So definitely a interesting career for those who choose to go with it.
Interesting career is a interesting word to use.
Yeah.
I think when you mentioned I forget, it was 6 years in, you said you started getting job applications. Was it 6 years in or 8 years in? Were you actively applying to other prisons, or did they find out about you because you were doing those? You said the way that you were training with questions for people. I'm not sure if I heard that correctly.
Okay. So they did the sergeant's exam. It comes up every so many years for supervisors, sergeants, lieutenants, and such. So as an officer, eligible to take the sergeant's exam, since I had been in for X amount of years. So I took it because it was kind of the thing to do. Your co-workers were doing it, so you kind of followed suit, as well as you kind of wanted to test yourself as well. So I took it and I scored first rank. And in taking the test, you also have to mark down if you would take a permanent and stationary job, a limited term where you could do a year or two in a position, and then they would determine whether they would keep you or not. Permanent stationary means you just got the job right off the bat. And also what areas of the state you were willing to accept, because in this type of career, you go to where the jobs are. So, you've got different prisons throughout the state of California. You go to where that job is. So you got to, if you want to promote and promote as quickly as possible, you go to those vacancies. You're going to bounce around a lot throughout the state, going institution to institution, trying to pick up those promotions. Mm-hmm. So after testing, scored first rank, I really wasn't interested in applying for the jobs, even though when you apply to take the test, you put in all that information of what type of job and where you're willing to work. So you would get job offers and I just wouldn't answer them or tell them like, no, I'm not interested. But then a lot of other coworkers were actively seeking to promote, and they were talking about the process of their interviews. And I said, well, that's very interesting. I think I'd like to get on that experience and go ahead and interview at some of these places to see what type of questions that they're asking, and just gain the experience. So in doing so, I was offered a job immediately at Norco State Prison at the end of the interview, which is unheard of, but it was for limited term. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go ahead and pass, because limited term, I could come in here a year or two, and then you could end up not accepting me and then sending me back home. And then to get up and move and be here for a year or two is a big process. I don't want to do that if it's not just the job outright. So after receiving these applications from interviewing to get the process, I decided to go ahead and promote and accept one, which was at Donovan State Prison.
Is there any regret, just kind of thinking back just on the career path of that, like should you have taken that Norco one, or any regrets on the path of career?
No regrets, because you don't know. It's like choosing a career and taking a certain job. You have no idea what the other choices would have led you down. So you don't have, it's not like going to Costco electronics section and you're comparing TV to TV. All the information is in front of you, pixels, size. You can make a definite comparison. With the unknown, you have no direct comparison, so you don't know. Yeah. You assume, you would guess, but you don't know.
Yeah.
So in that, I'm happy with the choices that I make, because it's who I am.
Yeah.
And who I've become. So definitely glad that I did it. One of the negative things is that anytime you start a promotion, you're low man on the totem pole, your seniority starts over again in that position, in that category as sergeant. And if I would have had promoted from sergeant to lieutenant, I would have been the new booty and been a low man on the totem pole there, regardless of how many years I had as sergeant. And that's definitely one of the things that deters some people from promoting until the very end of their career, where, okay, I'm going to take a jump from officer to sergeant, or from sergeant to lieutenant for that last year or two, so that when I retire, my retirement's going to be based on that higher salary.
Yeah.
So definitely I don't have any regrets, because it put me out of the norm, out of what I was doing as an officer. So I had that experience to grow as an individual.
Yeah. If someone was telling you that they're interested in becoming a prison guard, what suggestions or advice would you give them? And then would it matter if they're 18 years old, 22, 28, 32?
As far as the age requirement, you have to be 21.
Okay.
And the reason being is that in the position, in this law enforcement, you have to carry utilization of a firearm. So you have to meet the legal minimum. So, you must, if you're 18, work up to it. You got time to train, get yourself physically fit and ready, mentally study what it is, take some tours. Like if you want to get involved in law enforcement, they say, request to do a ride along with your local police departments. You can get a brief glimpse. You can tour an institution to get to see what it's like inside. Definitely little baby steps that you can do to try to head towards that until you're 21. What department you're going to, what firearms do they use, have an adult take you to a firing range and develop proficiency in the equipment that you will eventually be utilizing if you get into that career and are accepted. As far as pursuing that career, I tell everybody do something else. I have 2 children and I would never want them to be correctional officers. Go to college, pick a different career, be a dentist, be a nurse. There's a lot of other noble professions that aren't going to tax you in the way that this does. Not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. There's a high rate of divorce. Unless you have your first divorce in, we consider you're not even vested. The different ways to deal with the stress level. Alcoholism is a high rate in officers, especially correctional officers. They say that there's a lot of mental health studies done that there's a lot of PTSD of working in that type of environment is equivalent to being in a war type environment, just due to the stress and the adversity and the violence and the negative impact of all the, you don't go to your job and they tell you, hey, F you so-and-so, and no, I'm not going to do this and that. And that's on a daily level. Mm-hmm. So I definitely would not want to tell somebody to go in that profession without knowing all the risks. Yeah. I personally, I don't have patience. I don't like waiting in lines. I don't like being in a wolf pack on the highway. I want to be the first. I don't want anybody else around me on the road. Even in certain things, your correctional awareness, we call it, and being to observe the situation, knowing your environment because your life depends on it. Doing that in public, looking at what people are wearing, how their body language, what they're driving, how they're moving, the way they're talking, specifically what words are they using. And then in an environment like going somewhere where there's a large gathering, music festivals, major league sports, arenas, even just to the beach or a crowded restaurant. It's something that you tone down, especially after retiring for so long. I haven't been in that environment since 2014. So you definitely get a decompress, but it doesn't leave you, not in its entirety. And it's funny how somebody could come up that you've worked with and they'll bring up something in the past, an incident that you were both involved in. And then next thing you know, mentally, it was almost like you never left. You're in that moment, you're right back at it. You might as well be back in uniform. Wow. It just yanks you right back in mentally. Yeah. But after decompressing, it goes away a lot quicker. So knowing all that, knowing the physical cost that it can do, there's other people, even though I'm medically retired, there's other people way worse condition than I am. And even with me, with 3 back surgeries, and a possible, shoulder surgery coming, and a fourth back surgery that might, for the disc above my fusion is thinning out. I might have to fuse that one as well. At least I'm not in a wheelchair. I'm not in crutches. I can do things, but I also can't do things. I physically guard exactly what I do, knowing that if I do too much, I'm going to have a bad night. I'm going to be achy.
Yep.
Or if I throw my back out, then shit hits the fan. I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Popping meds and trying to get appointments with the doctors to get, shots into the muscle sections of my lumbar in hopes to just decrease all that painful inflammation. So, you'll never catch me, tennis, football, or any kind of sports other than just walking. This definitely had an impact on lifestyle. And knowing that, it can cost that. Definitely there's plenty of other careers where you can make some money and not have to be in this type of situation.
Yeah.
Talk about the process of getting into corrections. Like, it takes over a year, and took me over a year.
Wow. Okay. And actually, one question was an application to, where was it specifically? I signed up for a jail security next to Donovan State Prison, but they never followed up on my application.
Okay, there's actually 3 institutions there. And I don't know if you want to call them institution, because institution kind of sets itself at the state level, like a state prison. Donovan State Prison is the only state prison in San Diego County. There's 2 other facilities next to it. One is George Bailey's, which is the sheriff's department. So San Diego County Sheriff runs and staffs that jail. So he wouldn't be applying to that directly. He would be applying to the sheriff's department. Back in the day, to work for the sheriff's department, you would have to start in their jails first and then earn your rank, time in department, to go out and start doing patrol or assigned to a substation or wherever. So everybody started in the jail first. Now that's separate. Now you don't have to go to the same academy. They have a separate academy for corrections, and you still with just the jail system. The third one there is actually a federal institution housed by or run by private security.
Okay.
So that's not even like a Bureau of Prisons type of job where, you like just say robbing a bank. That's a federal crime. You go to a federal prison. Well, some of those are like club feds, and they're not run by federal Bureau of Prison officers. Other ones are like run by hired security.
Okay.
And that could be something like, say you're an illegal alien and they find out you're undocumented, but you're still doing time. So you did a crime here, you got picked up by the state system, you're doing time in the state prison. Once you paid your dues and did the time, you get kicked out. Well, you get kicked out to one of those small prisons, and it's run by private security, but for INS, Department of Homeland Security, and you're housed there until you see a U.S. magistrate, a federal judge, to determine what to do about your case, whether they allow you to stay back in the States or you get deported because you're not here legally.
When you look back on your career, do you regret anything about actually applying and working there, or would you do it different?
I think that's kind of a catch-22 in the sense that, hindsight is 20/20, but you don't realize that if you didn't make any mistakes in life, you wouldn't have those opportunities to grow and to build. They say that, like life in a petri dish, if you didn't have pain as a stimulus poking at you, then how would you grow? How would you know to react or respond? Yeah. So same thing, like, if you married that one person and now you're divorced, would you have ever, hindsight's 20/20, would you have ever married her? And most people were like, oh yeah, I wouldn't, except in the part where they have kids. And they're like, no, because even though I went through what I went through, I wouldn't have my children, which I love.
Yeah, totally.
So it's one of those type of situations where, some people, they do want a do-over.
Yeah.
But by doing that do-over means erasing everything that's you and what you've done.
Yeah. So how long ago did you work for the prison system? And then how long did you work for?
I started in November 1st, 1997.
Okay.
I stayed at a friend's on Halloween night. We went out that night trick-or-treating with some of his little cousins, nieces and nephews. He took them out, and then that night we went out. Then that morning they took me to the airport, and I flew up to Sacramento. And then the prison system, the Department of Corrections, picked us up in a bus for those of us who were there and drove us to the Richard A. McGee training facility on November 3rd.
Was that a plan? Like, was it a plan thing? How long was the application up to that point where they picked you up?
Okay, up to that point, it takes roughly a year.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to get into the department, and the fact that I wear glasses. I had that radiokeratotomy surgery done. That was popular before LASIK and laser surgery was done to correct your vision. As with anything military, law enforcement, you have to be in a certain physical condition. And some of that is basically eyesight. You have to have it well enough to perform the duties.
Yeah.
So I had LASIK done in 1995. It takes a whole year of quote unquote healing for your eyes to stabilize. So I had to wait till 96 to turn in my application. They go through the vetting process. You go and you take the test, see how you qualify, and then you have to go through medical. And in fact, in that year, they barely started the psychological evaluations, and I went through before they did that. So I was even quicker than the people after me.
Wow. Do you remember
the year process?
Do you remember what was going through your mind just as in when you applied? So that you're saying 2 years ago or 2 years prior to the application?
Yeah.
Do you remember thinking, or why did you apply? Do you remember that?
Here, growing up in Imperial County as a small agricultural community, there was only certain jobs that before, back in the day, our parents' age, you could work for a company your entire 30-year career and expect to get a pension, Social Security, and you're golden, making the right decisions and the hard work. Well, in this small town, there wasn't that many opportunities. So if you wanted to make money and find a job like that, you got a city job, or you got a county job, or IID, Imperial Irrigation District job. Those were like the big ones, and there was a lot of competition for those. Then because we're being so remote, the prisons came in and said, hey, we can bring a lot of business. It's kind of like dangling that golden carrot in front of certain types of, not situations, but certain communities. Like, hey, we're going to bring money in, and we're going to have these hundreds of jobs, thousands of jobs, from the construction of the institutions to staffing the institutions. So, we're an economic boon for you guys if you don't vote us out, if you allow us to come and set up shop here in your county. So with that said, the county, of course, jumped at that opportunity, and next thing you know, the prison is here. So, graduating from high school, going to junior college, and then another thing is, my father was involved in law enforcement, 33 years, Imperial County Sheriff's Department. So it wasn't something that was different or foreign, a career in law enforcement. So my mother, who was on the city council for the city of Brawley at the time where I lived, which was a city about 12 miles away from Calipat where the prison was built. They had what's called a CAC, Citizens Advisory Council, and basically what they did is they invited people from the community to the institution, have like a business meeting or this is what's going on at the institution meeting to just inform the public. So then these Citizens Advisory Council, CAC members, then go back to the public and, talk about what it's like in the prison, because it's an enclosed system. What happens in there, people have an idea of, but unless you're actually in there, you don't really know the specific details. And with that, people started getting jobs there, and you start to hear the stories about what it's like. But the reality is you start to see about what people have, and that's what those, now that's an opportunity to work a job that had a higher paying salary that was normal for the area.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, there's a housing boom. They're building a large tract of McMansions. All this other stuff is going on. They're building bigger stores. Instead of a mom and pop store, Walmart's coming in. And all of that had to start from somewhere. It had to start from money. And that money growth came from the institutions. First, there was one prison. Several years later, they built another one about 20 miles away in the same county. And now you have double the amount of staffing. And now you have, more and more housing tracts being built up, property value going up, all because of the salaries. So that's kind of what perked my interest in the institutions. And then they talked about not only just the money, which you can just visually see in people and the new cars and the houses that they're buying and the cars they're driving, but also benefits. That was the big thing about trying to land a government job here with the city, the county, or the irrigation district, was the fact that as long as you didn't get fired, you had health benefits. You're working towards a retirement. And the institution not only did they have that salary, had great benefits, health, dental, retirement, all of that.
At that time, do you remember, I think you might have just said it earlier, but I don't know if I heard it correctly. Were certain, or during that era, were jobs kind of slowing down on giving pensions and whatnot, or has it accelerated more now? Do you kind of remember that?
Here in this type of agricultural area, it was pretty much just the same. It was slow growth, a town of 18,000, 10 years down the road turned into 22,000. If you really wanted to have an opportunity to go to college, you left. And that's the deal. As a young adult, if you wanted to go somewhere, you wanted to get a further education, you had to leave because those resources weren't here. So you would leave to another big city, San Diego State, UCLA, UC Berkeley. You would leave the city, and then once you left the city, you got a taste of a metropolitan area, which has increased choices and quality of life. You have better health care because you have more hospitals. You have a greater selection and variety of restaurants. So many other things. Actual shopping malls. It's not strip malls, but shopping malls and stuff like that. So, it all kind of tied into bigger metropolitan areas, more opportunities, and then also, say you wanted to be a biologist. Well, you come here into a desert agricultural community, there's zero jobs for a marine biologist. But you go to San Diego State and you're right there next to the Pacific Ocean. There's jobs, there's work.
Yeah.
So depending on where you wanted to go with your career, you had to leave not only to get an education or to further your education, but to find jobs in that career, that field.
Gotcha. Do you remember, so 1997, around that time, were pensions and companies offering pensions, was that on the way out? Do you remember it just declining like crazy?
I don't see that as a decline because there wasn't a lot of business. They were all small mom and pop.
Oh, I see where you're, okay. I see your
So basically it was Social Security, unless you got a government job that paid the pension.
Okay. Gotcha. So after 1997, once you got in, just describe your first day at work and how it all started.
Okay. So I remember my first day at work when we first got there. We went through the academy, got that type of training. It was 6 weeks long, came back down, started at our institutions. My first day, we weren't set into a specific job. Like some of the jobs is you're there 5 days a week for that same time frame. And then they have other positions where when you're brand new, you have to do a 2-year apprenticeship program. And for those 2 years, every 7 to 9 months, depending, you got shifted around. You had to work every shift, which was second watch was from 0600 to 1400, 6 to 2. And within that, they also had a 08 to 16, 8 to 4, and maybe like a 7:30 to 3:30 in certain specific type of job. But that morning shift, second watch. Then you also had to work third watch, which was roughly 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. and then first watch, which was 10 o'clock to 6 in the morning. So you had to do 7 to 9 months in each one of those to kind of get your feet wet into starting the job and all the different shifts. Then within that, you also had to do, which was a relief position, where it was holiday relief, where whoever signed up for a holiday, you worked behind them and worked their specific job for a day while they took that holiday. Then there was vacation relief, where whoever took a whole week of vacation or several weeks of vacation, you worked behind them for that week or several weeks, and then you would continue to. And what it basically did is it allowed you to be like a ping pong, move all over the institution at all different shifts to get that experience, that basic little tidbit of what it's like to work at the prison, and not just one specific facility during one specific time shift, only doing one thing. And you really got a showcase of what it is to work at the institution. So while trying to do all that, I remember my very first time I was on call. So basically we weren't plugged into any position. The institution would call you from the watch, and the watch office, they had a watch lieutenant, a sergeant, officers, and their whole specific duty was to make sure that all the positions were filled for the next shift. Anybody called in sick, anybody who already had a assigned holiday or vacation time, whatever, to plug the bodies into those jobs to make sure we had a full roster. So I was on call, and I would call in or answer the phone when they called to select a position. And I worked that first shift, was first watch in December, because I graduated all in November. The first 2 weeks of December was my 6 weeks in the academy. So those last 2 weeks of December, I was just an on-call. So working the minimum yard, where the trustees work, the minimum security inmates were classified, and those are the ones that do the majority of the work at the institution. They work in like the mini trash area, where it's kind of like a dump. And then also like all the yard work that goes around the entire outside of the institution, all the cleaning, janitorial. So I remember it was first watch, 10 o'clock till 6 in the morning. And that's when they do the majority of the counts, where, you know, what's the primary purpose of an institution is to be accountable for keeping those inmates inside the institution and not back, you know, in the public, exposing the public to harm's way. So my very first shift, my first day, was working that night shift there on the minimum yard, while all the inmates were quote unquote sleeping on their racks and taking count and accountability several times throughout the night.
Was did the training kind of get you prepared, or did you feel once you got to your first few days of work, there's a little bit of shock of what you saw or anything?
Yes, absolutely, because it was classroom training for those 6 weeks. And there's definitely a difference between learning how to do something and then going out and doing it. So the difference in this was applying the classroom setting to actual hands-on. And it's not the same like HVAC, like AC unit. Okay, we're in the classroom, we're learning about this, you know, AC unit and how to do a annual checkup on it. And then now you're at somebody's house on the roof doing the annual checkup on the thing. The stress level is different because there was no inmate contact in those classrooms, learning how to conduct a count or learning what the use of force policy, or, you know, going to the range and qualifying with the weapons of the department. You know, qualifying with the weapons department makes you proficient with that firearm, but it doesn't set you up for the time where you're a security gunner and you're watching out the back window onto the yard of several hundred inmates. There's an incident and may qualifying use of force, and you actually have to have that firearm with you, and you're actually aiming it at the inmates on the yard. You know, it's a whole different type of a situation that can't be taught. You know what I mean? The emotions involved, the mentality of, you know, following the department's guidelines in that situation. Is it a good shoot, bad shoot type of deal? You know, you can't teach that on the range. So definitely there was a different lag between classroom setting and actual application in an institution dealing hands-on with inmates, convicts.
What was the first memory the earliest memory you could think where you're like felt over your head on a situation?
Okay, it definitely felt nervous working into there because of the whole situation of you have a perception, but perception isn't reality. So when you're actually there going to work, and I was working on the level 1 yard, it's like, okay, first day on the job, you get those jitters and you're trying to figure out what's real versus what you think. It gets worse than that when you're going into a more dangerous part, which was actually going into the institution. It's a level 4 institution. These are guys, maximum custody. So they were more hardcore convicts. So that was definitely different than working with the people that were the trustees. They actually have a date to get out, a date to parole. Some of the other guys that were dealt with inside the institution, they're lifers. They're never going to get out. They're doing multiple 25 to life, multi-murderers, rap sheet, a list of crimes forever, starting from the juvenile years way into a young adulthood, into every time that they were able to parole from prior crimes, committing new ones, and now they're remanded back to the custody of the state. And, way different than the other guys who were like, okay, we screwed up a couple times, but we still allowed to do our time and go back out into the public. They get a chance. And they realize that continually screwing up in the prison while doing their time is going to mess that chance up. Where these other guys, if they don't have a date, then, there's no incentive to behave. There's no incentive to change from the mindset and the actions of doing what they did before that got them there.
Yeah. How many physical altercations on average on your shifts, or a week or a month?
See, that I thought you were going to ask, like, maybe through the career, and I would say countless.
Yeah.
To the point where after so many years, you would forget incidents until somebody who was there would bring it up, and then all of a sudden, it came back from long-term memory storage into like, oh yeah, I remember that. Violence is a way of life inside an institution because of the inmates. It's very political with inmate politics. It's very racially charged. And it's not done by the state or by the officers. It's all done by the mindset of the convict. There's strength in numbers, and this is true. Whether you see it with predators on a school of fish in the ocean, they ball up. You'll get a couple of us, but you won't get all of us. So, the predator fish go through and they nab some here and there. And by the time they're done, that ball of fish is smaller, but it still moves forward and grows. Same thing with the inmate population, where they segregate themselves among the Hispanic inmates, African-American inmates, white inmates, and then you have what's called other, which was catch-22 for everything else. So in order to keep their numbers up, they were very segregated amongst themselves. Even if on the streets, as a Southern Hispanic inmates, if they had an issue or a problem gang to gang, that got squashed. It's like, no, now you're just a Sereno. You represent all of Southern California. Sereno 13 for South, 14 for Norteños and North. And you're now just a single soldier, part of a bigger group, a bigger army of convicts. And so all that other petty stuff from the streets, that doesn't apply in here. Because it's not about one gang versus another gang. Now it's about ethnicity versus ethnicity by the inmate population,
Yeah.
So,
do you see is there a level of respect between inmates and prison guards, or is there none at all, or do they recognize the face and say they recognize you, and maybe certain people, maybe certain prisoners like you and certain don't? Do you have like any stories of that?
I believe that in order for it to function, there has to be a basic level of respect. And you can see that where if you have an officer that goes in, whether he's just new and he's trying to make it a name for himself by being a Billy badass, or if he's been there for a while and just has a bad attitude, you reap what you sow as a human being. So you got guys in there with a bad attitude, and of course it kind of escalates any negative situation. And then if you have a rapport with the inmates, respect begets respect. It makes things go by on a day-to-day basis a little bit smoother. So the respect is there until it's not there. And in that type of situation, it depends on what did you do by calling somebody out their name, or just having a bad attitude and just coming across as rough. Then of course the inmate could feel convict disrespected, and then it just starts escalating from there up and up until it gets to action. And then there could also be inmate politics involved, where an inmate wants to get off the yard. He feels he's in danger. He has too much drug debt, and he may just view as assaulting an officer an opportunity to get rolled up, put into administrative segregation, where he's in a single cell by himself, where the inmates can't touch him. If he comes out from his cell to go take a shower, go out to yard, go to his job, he's going to have contact with tens of other inmates to hundreds of other inmates. So the opportunity to be assaulted is there. So there's situations where, well, if I jump another inmate as a convict, I'm going to have to face those consequences, and I could be retaliated against because it wasn't sanctioned. But if I jump on a cop and just start fighting with a cop, then that's personal. And it's just me as a convict versus the cop. And then I'll go and I'll get a charge put against me, and I'll go to administrative segregation. But at least that takes me out of the situation from any inmate politics or access to be assaulted, by other inmates, to get stabbed because of my drug debt or because of any other situation. Like he may have been giving information, snitching, quote unquote. So, there's other situations where it's not even about respect with the individual. It's just a bad day that day. You could have had a normal rapport with this inmate. He gets some bad news. He's upset that he's in prison and can't deal with his family. His old lady said, I've had enough. He finds out that she's got a Sancho. She's seen a guy on the outside, and maybe either he finds that out or now she wants a divorce. He's having a bad day, and he's just looking to act out. And, this could be someone you had a regular rapport with beforehand up until that point. Or that inmate there could have been an issue that an officer had problems with somebody who's up in the higher ranks of the politics and the prison gangs. And then now they've targeted him for assault. And so they tell the other inmates, the younger soldiers, hey, you got to go hit that guy. You got to go attack officer so-and-so. And, it's not an issue of respect between the inmates and the officers. It's just, it's an assault.
Yeah.
And if you fail to answer the call as an inmate to go do the assault, if you fail to do what you're told, you'll get disciplined by being assaulted yourself.
Yeah.
So, on a day-to-day issue, dealing with somebody, and having that rapport and respect goes a long way. But there are going to be other days with the bad roll of the dice that, that's not even a factor anymore. It's just violence of the system.
Is prison riots common, not common? What's your experience with that?
It depends on why. They're not common in the sense that they don't happen every day. And one of the things that stops that is the lockdown and the way that they're handled by the administration, whether they give them full program right afterwards so that they can go ahead, and if they feel that there's nothing going to happen to them for having a riot, then they'll just keep going. Or if they're locked down for a period of time, then they don't have access to have a riot because they're all in their cells.
Yeah.
So traditionally, it's not something that happens all the time unless it didn't get dealt with. Say there was an issue of inmates are supposed to only buy drugs from their own race. They don't adhere to that policy. a drug user needs his issue, and he's going to go to wherever he can get it. And of course, a drug vendor is going to sell it to whoever wants to buy it. So if you're a Hispanic inmate and you're told to only sell drugs to Hispanics, and you sell it to African American inmates or white inmates, you're just trying to make a profit on your goods. So if you're a Hispanic drug dealer in the prison and too many other inmates owe you money from a different race, and you go up to them, to their shot callers or other inmates in their own little self-set up political system of having power, like, hey, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so in your group are behind. What are we going to do about it? And the thing is, you don't throw your own under the bus, because that's a sign of weakness. So you can't simply say, well, okay, those 3 inmates, go ahead and go deal with them because you're a different race. That's considered disrespectful, so they don't allow it. So then now you have the up and ups of both races. Say there were 3 white inmates behind on their drug payments to the Hispanic inmates. He tells his so-and-so up the chain. They go talk to the other white inmates that have influence. And then they decide either they together pull the money and pay for the 3 guys and then let the white inmates discipline their own. Or it could turn into a riot. The white inmates could say, hey, you know what, dude? We don't give a shit. F you. And if they can't pay, they can't pay. But if you try to touch them, hey, that's one race on another race. Don't expect us to not do nothing about it. And then at that point, then it becomes a challenge. Oh, well, if we let them get away with it and not pay, everybody else is going to think they don't have to pay. So now it's a sign of weakness. What are we going to do? And then that right there starts the riot.
Yeah.
But they'll wait. It doesn't happen in a split moment. They prepare. And then you can tell, you can sense that the inmates are kind of nervous. The patterns are different, the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they dress. And then you can see it, and then it happens. Usually they don't wait for a one-on-one situation. They'll wait till they're at yard and they can get up in groups. And then in the yard, they even segregate themselves to the different tables. That's like a concrete picnic table with bench seating. And that'll be, okay, that particular area of the yard is for the white inmates. That's the Mexican inmates or the Hispanic Southern inmates on that side. Yeah, the African American inmates over there. And that's their general area. Then you'll see them collect up and then start gathering and then moving. And then you can just see them like in the classic sense of 2 armies going to battle, and you can see them moving towards each other. And then it just kicks off. They start running at each other and it happens.
God damn. How many, out of your career, how many riots have you been present for?
See, when you go to work, every day is unique. When you go in and you start and you're young, like I started at 25 years old, you kind of want to make your bones for you're looking for action. You want to make your bones and you're young. I started at 25. You're looking for the action because you want to be a part of it. You want to develop your reputation that you handle business. So, and then as you go later on in your career, you're kind of looking for an easy day is a good day as you get older and wiser. Yeah. But during all that time, it's like every day happens so fast and there's so many all linked up, 365 days equal 1 year, that you kind of forget some of the stuff. I would have to say major riots. All in all, I did over 8 years as an officer, over 8 as a sergeant. I would have to say under 20. Okay.
But then there are probably like smaller, well, there's probably smaller incidents where that goes into the countless numbers, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah. Say an inmate who refuses to take his handcuffs off from an officer, and he goes into the cell and refuses to give the handcuffs up. From, just a one-on-one fight within the same race. That's not a big racial conflict. Cell fight, from, say, one Hispanic inmate or any racial inmate owes money within the same race. So they do an assault on him for not paying this drug debt, whether a one-on-one or two-on-one. So, I mean, there's countless other times where there's a lot of violence, a lot of incidents, where it's not a big riot per se.
Yeah. When you said drugs, what type of drugs are they dealing? Is there? I'm assuming that's both sides. There's stuff like cigarettes. Are they allowed that? And then there's a harder stuff that they're not allowed, and they still do it.
If they were addicts on the outside, they're addicts on the inside. That doesn't stop. It's a life choice. A lot of times, the major drugs were heroin. Their visitors would try to sneak in heroin, marijuana. And the thing about tobacco is that they used to be able to buy it in the canteen, depending on their work classification and how much money they would get or how much money their families and friends would send into them. Once a month, they'd go for a certain amount and were able to buy stuff out of the canteen, which is like, toothpaste, toothbrushes, shampoo, conditioner, soap, undershirts, and also cans of raw tobacco and rolling papers. They took out, and I think this was due to the cost of healthcare. They took that out from canteen where they were no longer able to buy tobacco because it was proven to be a cancerous health risk. They took out weightlifting and built little mini circuit training for that was more cardio. Because if you go in there and you're trying to lift weights to be big and bulky and you don't know what you're doing and you're swaying the weight instead of having proper form, you're prone to injury.
Interesting.
And the other. And now
I thought you were going to say they prevented guys from getting ripped because they don't want, like, if they get in a fight, they're going to do more damage if they're ripped than if they're just cardio guys.
Yeah, no, it actually all boils anything in government, whether what department it is or anything else, it's all about money.
Yeah.
Budgets, budgets this, budgets that, everything boils down to money. Whether it's a law enforcement, fire department, health, ambulance service, street repair, everything and anything about government is just the management of finance, where to put those dollars at work. And that's what it boiled down to is the cost of injury. So they stopped that, they stopped selling tobacco. And when that happened, I think tobacco was the most addictive substance as far as a drug in the institution.
Oh, man.
So that took over as the drug of choice.
Wow.
That's the most smuggled, and the cost of, in the institution is tobacco now versus the other drugs like heroin, marijuana.
So say whether it be heroin, tobacco, or marijuana, how often is it caught on someone? And would it from the outside world, if someone's looking at, if someone that doesn't know prisons at all, and they think, well, if that stuff is illegal, why is it even in there? If they think maybe the prison isn't locked down or the procedures to keep those illegal drugs out, how would you respond to that?
There are procedures, but like anything, nothing's 100%. Say back when we had in-room dining at restaurants, how do you prevent the spread of COVID? I mean, they could set up tables 20 feet away from each other. They could have had you come in, go to a room, strip all the way out, spray all your belongings and yourself with a mist of alcohol, and then have you breathe with like a respirator while in the restaurant.
Yeah.
But that's very far-fetching.
Yeah.
That's very invasive, very far-fetching. The cost of putting those procedures into effect versus what you're really stopping as far as the spread of, an illness while dining and dealing with other people. And the same thing as you apply that way anywhere else involving safety. There are procedures involved. The majority come in through visiting. And the thing is that if there's a specific situation, inmate's brother comes to visit him, they're allowed to use the restroom. They're supposed to check the restroom before and after the visitor uses it and goes back into the visiting area. So when they go to check the restroom, they let the brother back in to see his inmate brother, and they check and they notice that, whoa, wait a minute, in the toilet area there's some fecal matter and some little pieces of plastic. They think the brother had secreted drugs in little plastic bindles up into the anal cavity, used the restroom to get them out, and then before getting checked and patted down and whatnot, was allowed back into the visiting room to see his brother.
Yeah.
So that's the type of situation where if someone's coming to visit, you're not allowed to just immediately strip them out, check their anal cavity, do medical procedures. It's too invasive. And there's a considered a basic right to privacy, even in those type of situations where it is a prison. Yeah.
Was there ever any racial issues at you, like say a white prisoner saying, hey, you're Hispanic, whatever the issue thing that they may dislike you, or even Hispanic on Hispanic, or any, have you encountered the racial thing?
No, not really as a Hispanic officer in the prison. There was a situation where I was with another officer, we're monitoring the yard, and there were these, what were they playing? Handball. They were on the handball court, Anglo inmates, and the officer that I'm walking with is African American, and one of them said the N-word. Like, hey, something N-word, this or that. And so my partner on the yard heard him, like, excuse me, let me talk to you for a minute, guy. You got something to say to me? Were you directing something towards me, this, that, and the other? So are they very racially divisive? Yes. Are they very racially critical? Yeah, that too. A lot of the white inmates are there because of their gangs are based upon white supremacy, the premise of. So there is a lot of racial overtones in a lot of the things that happen in the institution, especially dealing with the white inmate.
Do you see more racial things or addictions or just violence? Yeah, if you had to say the prisons, what's a heavier amount? People are in there for violence, for drugs, for what?
Oh, for their incarceration?
Well, say their incarceration was violence, but it could have been racially themed. So is there, I don't know if there's a way to kind of guess on how many people, how much is racism, how much is just addiction to drugs, how much is violence?
That's type of question where it's actually all encompassing. You can't rob a bank usually without successfully rob a bank without some violence.
Yeah, true.
And especially if you're part of a gang who does it and you're robbing liquor stores and this and that, it all ties into each other. Also the use of alcohol, the use of drugs. If you look at the inmates, we call it a C file for central file, and it shows all their rap sheet of everything. It's all inclusive. It's like you don't make soup with just water. It's got to have other ingredients, and together, then it makes pho. Yeah. To get the number 2 with everything in it, with the noodles, the pho. You got it all, right? You got your bean sprouts, you got your jalapeno slices, get your hoisin sauce, sriracha. You got, all of it together then makes the pho. Yeah. And it's the same thing with the people incarcerated. They're not in there very rarely are they in there for just one thing. Like there was an inmate who was a clerk on Alpha facility back at Calipatria. He came home to find his wife cheating with another woman. And in that, he had just got so enraged, it was a crime of passion. He went and he got a rifle and he shot them both. So now, it's murder, but he wasn't gang banging. He wasn't attempting to steal anything. He didn't have a lifelong history of violent criminal behavior while he liked, drug use. Wow. It was just a crime of passion. They're a small handful, but they're not the norm. They're not the majority. And then as far as racial, we got a lot of inmates from the LA area, the African American Bloods and Crips. So while they would defend their set and gangbang against each other, same thing with the Hispanic inmates, one Hispanic gang versus the other gang, violence. But it was the majority of racial violence came from the Anglo inmates, the white inmates. Your 88, 8 letter of the alphabet is H. HH is Heil Hitler, and the white supremacists, where they didn't really commit crimes against each other. It was just crimes against other races, and those were the most racial.
What were some of the toughest moments as being a prison guard for you?
I believe the toughest moments would have to be the most violent, and especially in those was the ones that was violence directed towards staff. Responding to staff assaults, being in a situation where it's you yourself that's being assaulted. So I think that the toughest moments physically and emotionally had to be the ones involving, the violence with staff. Then there's other ones where there was an escape from the minimum facility, a white inmate owed drug debt, family disowned him. He saw no means of paying that debt back, didn't know who, what, when, where, how he was going to solve this issue. So right when they called him in from night yard, he waited outside. He had a blanket. He threw it over the concertina razor ribbon on top of the fence, jumped the fence and ran. Because he just didn't see an answer. Owed money, didn't know where he was going to get the money, knew he would have to get answer for it, and felt he didn't have any options. Had no family, had no friends to go to, so he took off. So he threw the blanket over the razor ribbon and ran it off into some fields, and it took a couple days to find the guy. They found him just chewed up and eaten by mosquitoes near some wetlands inside an old abandoned truck. So that day after my shift, which was third watch, 2 to 10 p.m., it was a 9:30 count. He didn't get, counted, so that we knew he was missing. I ended up working till the morning, almost to 2. It was like a 22-hour shift. Oh, jeez. So being out there, being on duty, still having to be alert, and with that adrenaline going in your mind, working and processing, it's a different level of stress, working 22 hours, 20 minutes, or 22 hour, 30 minutes, somewhere around there was the full day, because as soon as we went out on patrol and looking for them and then came back to the institution, we still had to do our reports. The day didn't end until we had our reports turned in. So from start to finish, that was a real long day. And then having to let them know the institution, I'm due back on duty in 2 hours. That's not legally possible. So, you're going to have to cover someone behind my shift. Mm-hmm. And then just go home, shower, because you're filthy. You've been in a prison for that long, and you just exhausted, a certain level of tired, and you just want to be clean and you just want to sleep. And then there's another situation where I was a yard gunner at the time, and we had an incident go down on the other side of the yard that was fenced off. It was a 2-on-1, 2 inmates on another inmate. They're assaulting him. He's defending himself until he falls. Then he goes into a prone position. You have one inmate kicking him about the head and upper torso, the other inmate kicking him about the legs. He goes into the fetal position and he tries to cover his head to protect himself. Now, then he kind of moves away and he's just getting kicked. Therein opens within our department the possibility of great bodily injury. And only under certain conditions are we allowed to utilize lethal force. So now we have a inmate, and part of the job is actually protect human life, even though they're all inmates. Our job is still to stop them from hurting or killing each other. So I have my state issued firearm, which is a Ruger Mini 14 chambered in .223 caliber. So I'm actually take aim and called racking around. We actually load a round into the chamber. And I got my finger on the trigger and I'm looking down the open sights at the inmate that's kicking it. And, I'm using breathing control, inhale, exhale, hold it, take aim. And then the sight alignment changed, the picture changed way at the end. And I'm looking, wait, there's color now. What happened? And I look up from the sights. It had changed to green. And what had happened was, as it had happened far down the other side of the yard in front of the program area, the yard was put down, it was going on. Other staff responded. And what changed the color was the color of our uniforms, which were green, olive drab, OD green jumpsuits.
Oh, shit.
So now they all responded from a gate behind the inmates. And so now they were in the shot. So I no longer felt safe shooting because now I have officers running up behind those inmates and they're actually in the line of fire. So they were able to get there and quell the incident and such. But I mean, when you're there and in the moment and you're about to shoot, there's a lot of things going on with you mentally, emotionally. So that's a different type of trying day as well. So definitely a lot of stuff. Other times when you're responding to a staff assault, these two inmates assaulted two officers during the same shift on the same facility where I was. There were two buildings over, and one was a female officer and the other one was male. So an older male, and as I ran from my building, linked up with the one officer who was in between the two buildings, the one that had the alarm and where I was responding from. We both ran through a gate that separated the yard to housing unit C4, and then to see the staff member coming out, after being assaulted. And the person was actually hit with their own baton that the inmate was able to wrestle away from them. And to see that, there's all these different things that there's these different things that require, or you deal with a different level of emotions. So, a hard day, a trying day, because of all these different incidents and different types of incidents, it's different levels of a hard and trying day.
Yeah. Huh. If I've heard some people say that cops, I'll connect this question, I'll kind of preload it. Cops tend to get into their position because they're type of people that like power. Now, I don't know how true that is, but that's just a statement I've heard. Do you feel that way with prison guards at all? Or if someone were to say that about prison guards?
I don't know. I mean, I think that in the environment, you have to carry yourself as a person of authority. When challenged, you have to act in a manner that is quote unquote alpha male, simply because of the position that you're in. These people have state issue. State issue is basically, 3 meals, a cell, and the clothes that are given to them. And what they're able to get through either quarterly package every 3 months from their families sending them something, or what they can buy at the canteen. That's it. That's all they're allowed. So they're not in a position to, I guess they're both the inmates, the convicts, and the staff are not in a position to back down, because either one is showing a sign of weakness. Like if you tell somebody, hey, I'm going to pat you down, and you're supposed to pat them down, conduct a closed body search. The inmate says, no, I'm not going to comply. You don't just let him go and go on his way, because now in front of all the other inmates, you're going to look as weak. You didn't follow procedure. And then all the other inmates, none of them are going to allow you to pat them down to conduct closed body searches, which is a failing in the safety and security of the institution. And then if it looks like the officer is being overly abusive to an inmate, the other inmates will respond to that inmate. Like, hey, why are you letting him punk you like that?
Yeah.
So there's a certain line of tension, kind of like when you fill a glass up to the top, it's about to spill.
Yeah.
Where, neither of you are expected to not only cross that line as far as just absently using force, but to back down as well. Because anything viewed as a sign of weakness in that environment from either side is you're looking to get taken advantage of.
What do you think is the worst story that you could think about from your career?
Oh, worst story. I would have to say, all in all, it would have to be the staff assaults, and it has to be there's two different kinds. There's gassings, where the inmate gasses the officer, where he puts, and most traditionally they'll take from their breakfast a little milk carton like you would get back in elementary school, fill it with urine, feces, blood, especially if the inmate knows he has a infectious disease.
Oh,
It's not just that material in and of itself is nasty, carries a lot of bacteria, and then tries to throw it through the door, either if it's perforated or if it's a solid door, through the side of the door, and gas the officer and try to get them with that material, feces, urine, spit, saliva, blood. That's a certain level of a disgust, to be in. And then there's the other one where it's just physical violence, like seeing that officer who was beaten. Now, those are definitely tough days. There was a situation where there was a large staff assault on this facility where I worked after my shift. During my shift, the yard is out and you have multiple inmates, hundreds of inmates out on the yards. Yard split in half, and you have one building utilizing yard, another building on the other side. So 2 o'clock, I go home. Next thing I know, yard goes in at like 3:15, 3:30, and before 3, there was a huge staff assault. So I hear about it, and then turns out that a lot of that staff were injured so bad that they had to go to the local hospital in town. And I was involved with the union at the time, and I actually went to that hospital to check on the staff, and kind of let the other people know in the union of what had happened and what's going on. There was an officer whose mom is a nurse, and he was actually stabbed in the head, and you do a lot of superficial bleeding in the head, and he was just covered in blood. And this is what I had seen over at the hospital. So I go in there, and I grew up with the guy, went to school with him, even though he was a couple years, above me in grade and age. So his mom was on duty at the hospital. She comes in, and I see him. He's like, "Yeah, I'm all right. I'm okay." His mom comes in, sees him, immediately goes out the room, and she's crying. And he's right there, and he's like, "Ernie, is my mom crying?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so not only did the guy have to deal with the fact that he was assaulted at work and hurt at work, because of his job choice and the situation, his mom is now, even though he's okay, outside in the hallway, outside his room, bawling.
Yeah.
So it's not just, it's physical and emotional in that type of job. And then the only reason that the violence stopped was because we had an officer that transferred from another institution, was in the control booth, actually shot and killed one of the inmates. And that was the final thing that quelled everything. And he didn't know that inmate had died. So I'm over there trying to protect his rights for the union. And I'm talking to the guy, and he's kind of out of it, and he's getting checked. He's got, things going on. I don't want to get involved with his health situation, HIPAA laws and all that now. So he didn't know that the inmate had passed. And so when he started hearing us talk about it, he's like, "Oh, the inmate died?" And I was like, "Yeah, the inmate died." And you can just see his facial expressions went blank, and he just went flat. And he was, dealing with the process of the fact that, he did his job, he did it well, and it was what was needed, but it didn't take a life.
Yeah.
Even though it was on duty, he killed somebody. And to see how that was going through, how he was dealing with that, even though he was dealing with his own medical issues at the hospital. Yeah. So that could be one of the worst times is not only just a staff assault, but a staff assault at such a level that you had multiple staff hurt. You work with these people, you become like friends and some like family. And how do you feel when you see a family member hurt? Those are the worst times.
Yeah. So I asked you about the worst. What do you think about the best? What's the most rewarding part of the job? What was some of the best memories?
I think as you get older and wiser, some of the best memories are, they say, like if you take a long road trip and you don't remember the drive, what that means is that you didn't have anything negative in the drive that made you go like, oh, I had to swerve, or oh, remember I hit that patch of black ice and I was skidding. The long drive where nothing was memorable was a good drive because there was nothing negative attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the good days are the days where you get to have that camaraderie and it's a peaceful, easy, smooth day. Later on, you realize those are good days. No. There's other days where you do the job and you catch an inmate with contraband, or you do a cell search and you find contraband and you think, yeah, I did a good job today. But definitely the days that are uneventful, you learn to appreciate that those are the good days.
Wow. What was that I was going to ask? Oh, what type of person do you think fits this type of job? Their personalities, if you had to describe, maybe even on the other side, what type of people should not apply to work in this job also?
I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different type of people. I've worked at 2 institutions. The custody level, or the amount of custody staff, from officers, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, is over 1,000 at each, in order to man the facility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And there's all different types. As long as you physically make it in and go through the academy and show proficiency in doing the basic duties, there's almost any type of person can come in and work. There's certain situations that I think different people bring a different perspective to, and I think that's a positive. Diversity is a positive. At first you could think that, well, it's a prison, it's rough, it's violent, only men should work there due to the amount of violence. But then I've seen where inmates have responded differently to female staff than to male staff. Or male staff, they're very like, hey, F you. But to a female, they're a lot more polite. So there's more of a sense of persuasion to get them to do what you want them to do when a female staff member asks versus a male staff member. Where they're more likely to have that attitude to tell you to go to hell. So definitely there's a benefit to having all kinds. I've worked with staff who I felt was a bit too lenient. They were a bit too friendly. But I think it all serves a purpose, because all inmates are different, aside from the politics and their own setup of rules that they follow, depending on who they are as an individual, not just as a convict and for what race that they're applying the politics with. And they'll strike a chord with different individuals. So definitely diversity helps. And I think what it boils down to, as long as you perform the duties, and as long as you don't shy away from performing your duties, because I've seen that as well from people that were just too scared to pull a trigger, or when it was necessary, or got too buddy with the inmates, would allow them to keep contraband that they shouldn't have, this and the other, hoping that the inmates will show favoritism when it comes to following the rules. Like, they're supposed to follow the rules anyway. And if push comes to shove, it's not, the system isn't set up for you to fight a fair fight. You're supposed to have the advantage. Hence, we have the training, the equipment, and the staff. So it shouldn't be a situation where, okay, I'm going to keep giving to you as the inmate just to get you to do what you're supposed to do. They play that angle. So, definitely there's some personality types that I think aren't conducive to getting the prison running correctly. Or the ones that, they call it giving up the house, that are too free to give up everything and not enforce the rules. But aside from that, as long as everybody can perform the duties, and I think that because it's different. Working at an institution is different than law enforcement in the streets. the majority of the time you don't spend every day dealing with a violent felon. You're dealing with the public, you're doing other duties, you're on patrol, you're just observing. Or at the institution, you're surrounded by hundreds of violent convicted felons. And you're having direct contact, processing them in and out of areas, processing movement, doing the clothed, unclothed body searches, dealing with the violence. So it's as far as like where you think like, oh, someone needs to be an alpha dog to be law enforcement. Definitely you have to hold yourself as in a position of authority. Otherwise, who's going to respect you and follow you giving orders?
Yeah.
Because if you're perceived as weak, there's a section of the population that'll just walk all over you like a doormat.
Yep.
So I think there's a necessity to that. But aside from that, I think that in our profession, in corrections, it takes all types. So there's not really, and in hands-on, when working with staff as far as an officer, working with them as my partners, and then as a supervisor, having my subordinates, it definitely been exposed to all different types of personalities. So there wasn't just one major type that's at the institution, or that it needed to be one particular type. It was definitely different. And I don't know if that transposes what happens in the outside world with the regular law enforcement.
When you say that that females, the presence of a female officer, the inmates get maybe a little bit more nicer, is it also way more dangerous for a female officer at all? Or how would you view that?
A man is a man is a man. We all make our life choices, whether it's to, join a gang or not join a gang. So you still have to understand that even though you label somebody because what they fit in that meaning as an inmate or a convict, it's a male institution, so they're still men, So in that aspect, they don't really come across unless, and it's interesting because there's a certain general truth to it, unless they have a R suffix, which is R for like rapists. So unless they're somebody that have a problem with women off the bat, like someone who's doing serving time as a rapist, already has an issue with women, and then now you have a person who's a woman in authority, I've seen them act differently to female staff, like already had an issue, chip on the shoulder off the bat. But I think that's specific to those type of inmates. Aside from them, as a man, even though you're a convict, you're an inmate, you don't normally come across as just, unless you're like immature and trying to make a name for yourself and like, hey, look at me, other inmates, I'm calling this female staff a bitch, aren't I so cool? Unless it's that immature situation, usually they come across as very respectful, because as a man, every man has a mother. You don't necessarily come across as just an asshole to women. Did
you have what is it, like child molesters in your prisons, or is that a separate? Do they segregate those?
No, they're not segregated. Before they had stuff like PC, protective custody, everybody did their time. And then it got to the point where inmates, not just rights, but just their wants were championed by the PLO, Prison Law Office. The thing is, like, if there's an income source, you go for it. That's what we call some attorneys, ambulance chasers. If there's the opportunity, and I saw it at the institution from the medical side, if an inmate had to go out for surgery or out to the hospitals, they'd have the file for that inmate and all the medical stuff, and then they'd have this little piece of like a postcard. It would be into sections, and they would use stickers, and those stickers are basically a service. So if you had to do blood work, if you had to go get an MRI, a CT scan, an X-ray, whatever, they'd put stickers, and that was basically like charging. Each one of those was a service, and a service that will be charged for. And there became a problem when at one of these hospitals, they would know the state's gonna pay. So against all the other people that come in that don't have insurance or have limited insurance, they can only squeeze so much blood out of a turnip. But if a state inmate from the state comes in, they're going to get paid. They're going to get their money. So next thing you know, their little cards got stickers all up and down, or they even sometimes triple charged to get that money from the state over the inmate. Dealing with that, you know, I forgot where I was going with that one.
I asked that child molesters, are they in there? Actually, go ahead, finish your thought.
So with the child molesters, so when you get the prison law office involved, and they're like, even if it's something that's not even championing a cause, the state, if they win, or even if they don't have to win, it just looks like it's going to be a lengthy process, they'll get paid off. It costs money to litigate in court. All the different days of postponements, paying for the attorneys, and the state has the attorneys, but it just costs a lot of money. So prison law office knows, well, if we champion against the state pays. Just like those hospitals knew that the inmates from the state's going to pay. So they were like, okay, well, you know, you got these inmates are being preyed upon. You need to deal with them in a separate manner to protect their safety, because, you know, you recognize the sanctity of human life. They're already doing their time. They're already in prison, and now they're being preyed upon in prison. That's not part of the criminal process. That's not part of the punishment. So you need to deal with that. And then came about protective custody. And mainly that was for gang dropouts and for people with R suffixes, you know, rapists, child molesters, and such. So, I mean, most of the time they tried to keep it hidden. But the inmates would look for it. Like, if somebody went to prison, one of the heads of the political system for that particular race of inmates would be like, hey, bro, who are you? You know, who have you served time with? What gang are you involved with? If you're involved with a gang, they want to see if you have a reputation, if you're in good standing. And they also want to know what you're in for. So if you can't produce your paperwork of why you're in prison, then they're like, you're hiding something. And the only reason to hide something is if you did an R suffix. You know, there's certain cases that even a battery on a spouse or child, say, you know, child abuse, spousal abuse, that's frowned upon just as much as being a child molester or a rapist. And you know, you'll get assaulted for that. So
okay, you almost answered. Yeah, you answered my question.
Yeah, so the deal is that, you know, what happens to them? They get assaulted. Usually, they try to mark them with like a cut to the face. So if you see somebody with a cut to the face,
wow,
you know, okay, they're permanently marked as either a snitch or someone as an R suffix, someone not in good standing. You know, R suffix being like a sexual crime.
Wow.
And such.
So yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I've heard a sentence quite a few times, or a statement that they say child molesters are the worst treated inmates from other inmates. They're like the lowest of the low. So you're saying that is pretty much true?
Yeah, I think with them, you'd have to lump in gang dropouts as well as snitches.
What happens? What's the drama with them? So if they get slashed on the face, do they go sit in the corner by themselves with other R-rated R people?
R suffix, yeah.
R suffix.
Basically, what happens is that, say someone doesn't produce his paperwork, and then somebody recognizes them. Say the inmate came out of San Diego, and they get TV, and they saw an article on him or read it in the Union Tribune, and said, "Oh, I know that dude. That dude, you know, raped like several kids at camp. He's a child molester. He's a chomo." And then they'll talk about it, and then they'll set him up for assault. Say he gets assaulted. They all go to ADSEG, and then they said, you know, I want the inmates who assaulted him to be put on in his central file as enemies, so they can't be housed on the same facility together. And as well as, now that he's an R suffix and known as an R suffix, safety is in jeopardy, so he wants to apply for a bed or housing on a protective custody yard. And that's what was kind of created because of situations like that. Because if you took him out of administrative segregation and put him right back on any other facility. Once they found out that he was our suffix, he was a child molester, he's going to be the target of assault continually.
A bit off topic. What do you think about Jeffrey Epstein? Do you know the story of him?
Wasn't he the one that supposedly committed suicide in prison in New York?
Yep, and then but he was the one that had like that whole network of underchild sex trafficking. I mean, like what it looks like in the hundreds of underage women, and potentially attached to high level people like supposedly Trump, Chris Tucker, or some of the other ones, Prince Andrew from Europe. Some of the, I mean, these are allegations. So, but anyways, what are your thoughts on if Jeffrey Epstein? Do you think he did kill himself? If you happen to know about that, about the news about it, and then also, would he have been, if he went to jail? Would he have been slashed on the face?
That's a different type of situation. It's a different world for the elite. I remember our union president went to a function with Arnold Schwarzenegger while he was championing some after-school agenda for government financing a program, the government to finance a after-school program for at-risk youth. And it was basically his dipping the toe into politics. And so our executive president at the time, union president, met with him and was doing this, I think it was an ad, like a TV ad for it, and that we were supporting it as far as a union and such. At the time, Schwarzenegger was driving around, I think it was an H1 Hummer, one of those original military ones.
Yeah.
And so the gas prices were on the climb up, but not that $3-4 like they were beforehand. So he recants a story where Schwarzenegger says, "Oh, I don't worry about things like that." Where no matter how ridiculously high the prices are and how us with normal salaries have to adjust, that he was in a different class. That our problems that we face aren't the problems that he faces. And as that, he lives his life differently. And it's not just him. There's a whole different segment of the population that are like him, the elitists. So, I mean, they live in a different world because of the money and the power and such. So it's, do the rules apply? They should, but they don't live by them like me and you.
Yep, gotcha.
The thing about Epstein is that in politics, you want to look like you have power, this, that, and the other. So you pay to play. All these fundraiser dinners, $400, $500, $1,500, $2,500, $5,000. It's also a meet and greet. So you sit there and you get your picture taken with so-and-so. I remember Schwarzenegger was at such a thing in Palm Springs at one of the golf resorts. And so if you bought a dinner plate, and when the mingling around, you go and you take your picture taken, it shows association. But if someone like Epstein was to go around and try to make it look like he had influence by taking all these pictures with people, it's not necessarily means that he personally knows those people, other than just, if you know the true story, he paid for a plate and took a picture.
Yeah.
But people try to play it part like, oh, well, look at me. I got all these pictures with all these people.
Yeah.
I'm a person of influence.
Yeah.
Or I'm an important person. Do we know if you have direct interactions with the people or not? Don't know.
The Jeffrey Epstein one is really interesting. The Jeffrey Epstein, it seems to be a very interesting case. Like Bill Clinton has like 26 flights to Jeffrey Epstein's island. It's logged, so there's written evidence that he flew there. Mm-hmm. As for Donald Trump, I don't think there was enough evidence. So that one I don't know about. Chris Tucker, I think, did fly on the airplane to Jeffrey Epstein's island. And for Chris Tucker, it might have been a one-time thing, but I think Bill Clinton was 26 times, if I remember correctly. 16 written down, I think. and then 10 other accused times of some sorts. And then all the 20 or 40 females that came out, they name certain people exclusively. So it's a pretty interesting case. I understand where you're coming from. There could be definitely some fuzziness to some of the details.
Yeah. And as far as him getting treated in prison, New York is definitely different than California. But I'm sure that being what it is, he should have definitely would have gotten different treatment than a regular inmate who was a bank banger or in there for a crime other than, what he was in there for dealing with child pornography and child cases. So
in your case, have you ever, or in your career, if someone did some heinous crime like that, so bad where it's like 50 to 100 women that they've raped and they're underage, have you ever heard of a potential inmate, or they're going through the court system and they kill themselves, like Jeffery Epstein? Have you heard of stuff, other things like kind of like related like that?
No.
Okay, so that one's Jeffery Epstein's a unique story, I guess.
I think because of who he was and because of the money that he had, he comes from a different segment of society. Yeah. And when you're dealing with the institutions and people, you're dealing with a very different segment of society. You're dealing with the, Joe Average or below John Q. Public. Yeah. And that's definitely not who Epstein was.
Yeah, exactly. So Emmett says hello, and I'm going to do the first online question from him. He says, what's the best strategy for not getting shanked and butt raped?
Honestly, being the biggest and the baddest is one way.
And baddest, okay.
Yeah, and the deal is, as far as getting shanked, it's your conduct. So if you don't go in there popping off at the mouth and making enemies, and you kind of follow the program, then there's less likelihood of disruption, getting shanked and stuff. As far as butt rape, always get a smaller cellmate than you.
Do you get to choose that?
Yes and no. Okay. They'll assign somebody to your cell, and then you can be like, we're not compatible. We need to move around, this and the other. Yeah. There's also been a lot more rules coming out. Pretty much there was a lot of behind the scenes, situations where it's not considered manly to have homosexual relations in an institution. Everything's very machismo driven as far as like quote unquote alpha style. But behind the scenes, at night in the dark, is a different story. So, and then there's also the thing about, rape. The Prison Rape Elimination Act, PREA, has come into effect. So there's a lot of things that were simply either small things that were not talked about that have been brought into the light now, and there's ways of dealing with them. And I think that was all brought upon by attorneys, attorneys for inmates, because they know the state's going to pay, either if they win the case or if they drag the case out long enough that the state just wants, dude, you're costing us, we're hemorrhaging money, let us just buy you off.
Gotcha. I've heard another statement that they said sagging, like when people wear their pants pretty low. They said that in prison, that's an indication that you want to be butt raped or you're gay. Do you know anything about that?
A long, long time ago, if you were sagging, it was either you were homosexual or that you were for sale. And the thing is about in an institution, it's an enclosed environment. It's still a segment of the population, but it's an enclosed environment. So if you have state issue where all you're given is just your 3 meals a day, a sack lunch and a hot breakfast and a hot dinner, and all you get is, if you can't afford toothpaste, you're given tooth powder. and it looks like pink Comet. So it just looks like that Comet scrubbing white powder, but it's pink. It kind of smells like toothpaste smell, like mint. And you're given a small bag of that in a little manila envelope, small little 1 inch by 3 inch tall envelope, and that's supposed to last you. You know, even if you can't afford a toothbrush, you're given a free toothbrush, but you can tell it's cheap. You know, it's even below 99-cent store standards.
Wow.
So if you want to have a quality of life better than just the state issue, and you're given, you know, a state soap, which is a small little soap, like a hotel soap, and it has a lot of lye in it. So a lot of inmates use it to wash their clothes. But to use it on your body, it'll dry you out like sandpaper. So if you want to get a bar of Dove out of the canteen or something else, you got to find a way to hustle, make money. Some of the jobs in prison are paying jobs, but they pay 8 cents an hour, you know, 9, 12 cents an hour. You know, you don't get rich in prison unless you win at a lawsuit and the state pays you a giant lump sum and they put that on your books, or you have family members send you money, or you hustle. One of those hustles is, you know, either make knickknacks and crafts and trade it for stamps or food items, soups, you know, handicraft items, or you do stuff like iron clothes, wash clothes, or sell drugs, or sell ads. You know, and that's what it boils down to. So sagging back then was something in the past. Now, with as much people incarcerated that are gang members, it's taken on a whole different story. You know, that may have applied 30, 40 years ago, but now when somebody's sagging, it's usually they're still maintaining the gang lifestyle. They're still representing their set, and it's about wearing their clothes like they did in the streets.
Gotcha. I got a question from Corey. He says, what impact would legalization, regulation, and taxation of drugs have on recidivism?
We can look not just in the institution, but look in the public. If you look at a place like California, if you look at a place like Colorado, making the drugs legal and therefore turning it into a revenue service, taxation for the government. A lot of the places that went into business are finding it hard to operate because of the high amounts of fees and taxation. Just to get your license, like to open up a bar, you got to pay $40,000 for a license. The licensing for a pot dispensary. I mean, the government is looking looking for so many ways as for revenue source that they're making it hard to operate. So, but has it lessened because they took it out of the light of the drug cartels and the local drug dealers? Have they lessened it? And the answer is no. You have two schools of thought. You have the ones that recreational use and those that are medical use, say of marijuana. Now, basically they feel normalized and there's a legitimacy to their wants and needs now because they don't have to do it in the dark back alley deals to score their dime bag and hold their head down like, oh man, I'm breaking the law, I'm just a pothead. So they kind of humanized drug use, but it hasn't done anything to lessen it. You know, the government didn't try to lessen drug use. They just wanted the money from it.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to break the cartels by taking their revenue stream from them, which has nothing to do with helping anybody that's on drugs or wants to get off drugs. It's just about taxation. So the same thing at the prison, legalizing or anything of that nature isn't going to have anything to do with recidivism. The biggest thing about recidivism is choices. And so, and when you want to look at a choice, the best thing to look at somebody is smoking. Somebody who smokes cigarettes, who's been a long time user or a short time user that smokes a lot, quit smoking. Some people try the patch, some people go cold turkey, but the whole deal is it takes a strong mind and choice to simply say, I've reached my level, enough is enough, and I'm going to stop. And to fight their urges to pick up that cigarette, whether it's regular, it's I only want to smoke when I'm drinking or only when I'm socializing. But it's the person who, like a buddy of mine smoked and was having a daughter. And he said, okay, I'm going to stop. I don't want to be smoking around the house or have it smell on me, when I bring my daughter into this world. And quit cold turkey. Didn't have to use a patch or anything of that nature. And it was just the strength of the decision. And that is the same thing with recidivism. You can sit there and you can blame, oh, I'm broke, I'm poor, my parents didn't have money, they couldn't send me to college. When a broken home, I didn't have all the, availabilities that were to other people. So, I had to hustle illegally to make mine. And we kind of glorified that when the music and in certain TV shows. But it's a choice. For all the amount that became into gangs, into drugs, this and that, there's a story of the couple kids who got a scholarship, studied, worked hard, got a scholarship, went to UCLA, went to Berkeley, got out, started a career, and now they're, car owners, homeowners, working, that didn't gangbang, that didn't put anything in their veins or up their nose, inhaled. So is it possible? That's like saying, is it possible to be a Navy SEAL? It's hard. It's hard as hell. Yet there's hundreds of them out there. Is it possible? Hell yeah, it's possible. You just have to adapt and overcome and be of that caliber that you can make it. It's not everybody. Not everybody makes it out the hood. But it is possible. And it's possible by those who made the choice. Smoking is 100% possible if you decide to stop and you stick with it. But if you're somebody who's going to make excuses or you're looking for the easiest route, what does that say about recidivism? So it's that certain amount of population, and especially being a law enforcement career, law enforcement officer, is you're dealing with people that are always pointing the finger. I look in the mirror, I don't want to face the fact that I'm a bad person. I'm not going to cop to the fact that I'm a bad person. Life is bad to me. I didn't have opportunities, always excuses, and it's your fault. F the police, F the government. I'm just doing what I want to do. Even though it's wrong, I'm not going to say it's wrong because I don't look at myself and say I'm a shitbag. But it's always everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
It's a cop fault that I'm in trouble and I'm in cuffs and I got put to jail. Fucking cops. Well, maybe your actions of going in there and trying to rob so you can feed your drug habit. I mean, who starts off as a druggie? Everything has a beginning, and that beginning starts with a choice.
In your time, did you happen to see a decrease in inmates due to cannabis? Meaning, I don't know when California put in their legalization for medical and recreational. Did you happen to see that come into play and less inmates were coming in due to cannabis?
No. And I think that was because I was getting out towards that time.
So this next question is from my wife. It's actually pretty cool. This is her first time asking a question on the platform. So it was interesting just to kind of see her excited about this topic. Do you see prisoners actually do good to get out of jail early? And how many, I'm guessing her next question is, what's the percent that have life sentences that you deal with?
The inmates, when they come through, they're sent to several prisons that are called reception centers. That's where they're determined through a point system of what institution they're going to go to. They take into factors like, where were they incarcerated at? Is there an institution close to their home area where they have a family support network that can house them at that custody level? So we have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 inmates. And then beyond that, we have, administrative segregation, death row, certain other specialty type of levels. Security housing units. So traditionally it's 1 through 4, 1 being like the trustees that live in outside the main area of an actual prison with the electrified fence and such. So once they get determined and then they go to an institution, that institution usually within a couple of points will house a certain style of inmates, depending upon the architecture of that institution. I started off at Calipatria State Prison in 1997, which is a level 4 institution. So I dealt directly with, maximum custody inmates. The majority of them, I would say, maybe up to 80% were lifers. So it was a very small percentage that actually, had a date and that would actually parole. As far as doing good or doing, in order for them to get early release or to get time off their sentence, they had to do certain things, which was like, one, when they go through reception center and they determine what their education level is through all this testing, is go to school to get the equivalent of a GED. And once that's done, then they can do other things that may be court ordered, which is more normal now, like anger management, things of that. And they have to complete a whole series of treatment and get their certificate. And all those things are taken into account to lessen their sentence. Because, like I said, government's about money, even departments. And the sooner you get an inmate out of prison, the sooner you stop paying the exorbitant amount it costs to house a life. Because you're talking 3 square meals a day, medical expenses, and that's health and dental and vision, and also the clothing, and then the staff it takes to supervise them. You're talking per head, that's a lot of money per day. So the sooner they get out, the sooner it becomes a cost savings. So with those programs involved, the education, self-help, they have AANA, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous programs. And the more that they get involved with actually improving their situation, the quicker they can to get out. And even like working, getting assigned a job, getting the opportunity to actually make a little bit of change to buy small goods, at the canteen or purchase a quarterly package. All that stuff takes into effect. And the thing is that there's penalties if they don't, if they don't do that stuff. They're actually pushed towards getting out early by getting into those programs. It's not like, oh, I want to volunteer, I want to get involved in this. It's like, okay, we're assigning this to you. And if you fail to go to this educational program that we're giving you and you refuse to go, we're going to write you up. We're going to lower your classification. You won't be allowed to go to canteen as often or at the amount of money that you can spend. And there's actually penalties involved. And then they can end up doing their full term. Like say, when they say, okay, you're doing 7 years, but you're getting out in 4.5 for good behavior. All those programs that they put an inmate into is considered part of that good behavior. So the design it's not necessarily an improvement or it's supposed to help them. But like I said, like quit smoking, it's based upon a choice, whether you want to or not. But all that stuff about getting an education, getting into programs, all that stuff to improve the individual, is all geared towards costing the least amount of money to incarcerate them. 4.5 years of paying them daily what it costs versus 7 years, you're talking of tens of thousands of dollars. So there is that opportunity, but it's definitely there for the majority of the inmates that are not doing life. And it's almost expected, that they go through those programs just to do your 4.5 out of 7 and get out.
When people say prisons are for profit, is that all prisons? And or in correlation to this last question that you just answered, like if they keep the prison full and keep inmates in, then they get more money. Do you see that or?
No, the inmates do not generate income. It's not like they're creating patents and that the Department of Corrections is going to get a piece of that money off that patent. It costs money to incarcerate. They're not for profit. Now, when you talk about a for-profit institution, you're actually talking about things like the GEO Group, other privatized prisons. And then the privatized prisons use security instead of law enforcement. And they're looking for ways to cut costs, because if you have 2X's is your income and it's 1X of cost, if you can take that 1X to half an X, now you're 1.5X income. So the quality of medical care, the training of the staff and quality of staff selection, the food, the amount and the quality of, anywhere they can cut a corner, they can, because it's about the quality of the stock market for the GEO group and getting it to the shareholders. It's for profit.
Gotcha.
So are all institutions? No, because the state of California loses money.
Gotcha.
We're a multi-million-dollar budget for the Department of Corrections with all its institutions, and they don't generate anything for the state.
Yeah. Do you happen to know what these statistics on how many private institutions there are in, say, California versus state?
No. I don't have to follow those statistics.
Yeah.
But another thing is tell Emmett hi. I really enjoyed hanging out with you guys back when I lived in Point Loma, and you guys were operating a business in the area.
Yeah.
So definitely miss socializing with you too.
Yeah, I'll let him know. You had a cousin that passed away from COVID and was also a prison guard also? Is that correct?
Yeah, he started in 96. I started in 97. He's my cousin, the firstborn son to my dad's brother. And we both worked together at Calipatria State Prison. He worked there. I actually had shifts where I worked alongside him. He transferred to another institution, and I guess there was an outbreak of COVID at the institution. Don't know if it was from staff or inmates that brought it on. He was told to go get tested, found positive, and was told to self-quarantine at home for 14 days. During that time, he wasn't feeling well. I believe he had some trouble, respiratory issues. He went to go lay down, and he passed. He never got up. His wife found him, dead in bed.
Oh, jeez. Was there any underlying health conditions for him prior to COVID?
No, and that's the thing. A lot of people, I think, unless you have skin in the game, you kind of look at it as something that's not real.
Exactly.
So he was perfectly healthy. He had done a diet years ago and became very slender, and had no underlying issues. People were asking me, what happened to him? Was he diabetic? Did he have any other kind of issues? I says, no. He passed strictly from COVID. It wasn't like COVID. I've had other elderly family members who had medical issues that COVID was the last nail in the coffin. Mm-hmm. That's what pushed it over. But not in his case. It was solely COVID. Yeah.
How's the family dealing with it, and how are you dealing with it? And when was it?
This happened in the middle of the year, middle of 2020. And as far as dealing with it at the time, there was no closure. People were still figuring out, can you even have a funeral? Can you have any type of service? With the stay-at-home orders and everything. And some people were still having services, but only limited to 10 people. So, he and I were pallbearers for my grandfather's funeral. And that was something that I kind of wanted to go full circle and be a pallbearer at his. But that was something that never was ever going to be because of COVID.
Jesus Christ.
And then I had to find out, we were waiting to find, everything was in limbo. Are there going to be services? What are they going to do? People were speculating that anybody who died of COVID had to be cremated. The thing is, it was all guesswork because nobody had any final answers.
Yeah.
But I found through Facebook, I was kind of asked family, what's going on? Nobody really knew because it was up to his wife. Turns out that they weren't having services because some other family members, had contracted COVID, but not as bad, and were waiting to get better before we could all get together. And then while I was assuming that that's what we were waiting on, I see a Facebook post by his wife, and it's a urn. and turned out it was him and his ashes. She posted that, I finally have my husband home. And, that's how I found out what happened about him in a Facebook post that was cremated. I think it's been a very 2020 and now on 2020 and on has been very trying time in the whole figuring out of what really is going on and what's allowed.
Yeah. The one of the guests that I interviewed probably like three or four interviews ago, his family, his wife, his 2 kids got COVID. They're all fine. The daughter lost permanent taste, so like even 5 months later, she still can't taste her food, and she's gaining weight because like her brain is saying like, "Hey, eat something. I want to taste something." She just kind of continues eating, I guess, and she's just putting on weight. And it's just even though at first when he told me about it, I was like, oh, maybe it'll be good for, like if I went through that, maybe I could lose some weight after that. But that sucks to be gaining weight because your brain, the brain signals and all that stuff is all complicated. It's crazy. And then I heard like marathon runners, people that have no underlining conditions where they get COVID and they die, where they're really healthy, it seems like, because they're running marathons. Yeah, it sucks how COVID just, it's actually terrible where in the sense of you can't know of what to predict or what to do with this because it seems random, at least right now, because we don't have enough medical evidence.
Yeah.
And then I hear the most recent numbers I hear is 1% death right now without the vaccine. If you get COVID in America, there's a 1% chance of death with the vaccine. So then you're even 1% of 1%. So what is that? 0.001 of a percent that you'll die. But I hear that 10% will have permanent damage or permanent effects thereafter. So I don't know if it's you have a hard time breathing or your whatever body part, I don't know, liver or something. I don't know what part would hurt thereafter. So you have a permanent situation thereafter. So it's not even just potentially dying. Dying sounds like in that case would be easier instead of the 10% of people that are going to have permanent issues thereafter. That sounds terrible to me, the permanent stuff. I feel like the dying alone would really suck because if at the time earlier back in March where people were getting sick, they had quarantined them off and you're stuck in a hospital room by yourself and then family outside could see you through a glass door, or a glass window, but they can't come into your room. So you just die alone. It's fucking sounds terrible.
Yeah. And I think that it's a situation where, like I said, to have skin in the game, there's a lot of people who, they say the UK variant is coming and that it's even deadlier. And it's, like you said, it's so new. We don't have a lot of data. We won't know for years. And we're living through it.
Yeah.
Instead of dealing with it.
Yep.
So we're living through it. All this information will get processed once it gets dealt with years from now, as far as the quality of how effective the vaccines really are and such. So it's crazy. It's hard to wrap your head around it. And yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, it's just the flu and so many people die of the flu. Why are we even tripping? That moves me back to the skin in the game. I've directly lost distant relatives. So I'm thinking like, all these people talking, if everybody lost one direct close family member, everybody would be on the same page. All like you see on TV or on social media, the Kens and Karens and everybody, the anti-maskers, what you don't see is them putting their money where their mouth is. Mm-hmm. How many people are suiting up in a Tyvek suit, PPE kit, and donating their time at a mortuary or at a hospital?
Yeah.
How many medical volunteers do we have?
Yep.
They sit there in the safety and comfort of their home,
mm-hmm.
and they're not putting their neck out on the line, yet they're talking all that crap and acting out on it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, in that case, I figured if things were not necessarily just, but in a situation where the playing field was even, if everybody lost a close family member, direct family member, everybody would have the same loss. Everybody would have the same skin in the game. And it's such a sad thing to say, that everybody deserves to have somebody die. But I think that's what it takes to get people all on the same page.
Yeah.
And the reason that it's gone on for so long is because without a direct result, like speeding, it's illegal. It's against the law to speed. Nobody wants a speeding ticket. But a lot of people do it because they figure they're not going to get caught.
Yeah.
And if they could do it and they don't get caught, and they do it every day and don't get caught, and there's maybe 3 times in their entire life that they actually do get a speeding ticket, then they don't feel the direct results. The punishment isn't always there as a deterrent.
Yep.
So since none of these people have that quote unquote punishment, they're not deterred. And if everybody did lose a family member, they'd be like, oh shit, this is real.
Yep.
My cousin's dead, my son's dead, my mom, my dad, my grandparents. And unfortunately, that's what it takes to get everybody on the same page.
Yeah.
But we're not there.
Was there extra drama or hardship being that your cousin was the first correctional officer in California to die from COVID?
Not necessarily. That didn't change or add to the fact. Just the fact that, I have a family member, my cousin, and he passed, was bad enough, so that he was the first correctional officer didn't change that,
Yeah.
So I think what was great is that they had a service at Calipatria State Prison, and I was able to request permission, and I attended.
Nice.
They actually folded 2 American flags, and after speaking with the facility captain and lieutenant, who actually I worked with, and I had more seniority as an officer at the time working with them, they were actually able to take that folded flag, put the rounds from the gun, from the 21 gun salute, into the flag along with the Calipatria State Prison challenge coin. And I was able to, after the services that they held there, take that flag and present it to my uncle, Danny Boy's father, and give it to him. And that's the way things are. I think that may be the only thing he's gotten, because the urn is kept with the wife. So as far as trying to develop closure for the loss of his firstborn son, that was at least something that was tangible, that I was able to put in his hand.
God. Ah, man, that's fucking tough.
Yeah, it's all part of life's rich tapestry. You have to take it all in.
Yep.
For those of you listening only and not watching on YouTube, I'm displaying a picture that was handed out during Danny Mendoza's service. The service was held inside the institution by his fellow correctional officers and his cousin Ernest. Danny was born on December 11th, 1966, and passed away due to COVID on May 30th, 2020. Join me in a moment of silence for him and his family.
All right, I'll change topics and switch it to... So this is from Trin. She works at NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness. She did an interview with me about three episodes ago, I think. Would you help others in NAMI, meaning people that have like a career or being in such a harsh working environment, the things that you've been through, would you consider donating time to NAMI to helping those that have worked in something that you've done and been affected like what you've done?
So she's coming from a mental health background, and that's something that is actually expanded upon in recent years. Back when I first started in 97 and starting through the 2000s, mental health was had a very negative connotation to it. It's almost like you simply had to man up and do what you do, and you deal with it. Any sign of needing help was considered weakness. So we didn't address situations which cause a lot of the issues involved as, the lack of individual counseling, family counseling, the dysfunctionality, the high rate of divorce, alcoholism, violence in the home, because, it wasn't addressing mental health issues wasn't an socially acceptable way to deal with all the stress. That has since changed. I know CCPOA, the California Correctional Peace Officers Association, has actually done some things with mental health awareness groups. They tried to do some testing, asking some questions, and definitely putting more forward as far as free help with the insurance. You get so many visits on an individual basis dealing with a psychiatrist, psychologist, and then also for family health and family members like children. So it's definitely taking a step in the right direction as far as recognizing, acknowledging, and addressing mental health issues. They're doing that at the institutional level for the inmates. They're doing groups and such. So, not only are they doing that there in the institution, and mental health is a big department now within the institution. On the other job front, for the officers, for staff, it's taking a toll in the right direction of no longer keeping that in the dark. As far as myself,
Okay. What we were talking about the
mental health.
Yeah, NAMI. I think. I'm guessing from her question was, so at NAMI they'll have speakers that come and share their stories, and then the speakers can connect with those that, say, the groups that arrive, and so the speaker could help make those groups feel better by sharing their story. So if you think about it, you could reach out to NAMI, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a situation like AANA, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, where they sit there and, I'm so-and-so, I'm a alcoholic, or I'm a narc addict or whatever, and then they share their story, and thereby they create that situation of connection with the group.
And usually there's one organizer. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about that statement, the prison guards that say if you haven't been divorced, you haven't been doing it long enough or something like that. You said it's something like that.
Yeah, unless you at least have your first divorce, you're not really vested.
Yeah.
So I've known guys that have been divorced 3 times. So yeah, it's definitely something where there's a lot of stress involved, and it's sometimes it doesn't make it conducive for a good family environment. And the divorce rate is definitely very high for correctional staff.
Divorce rate, and then alcoholism, suicide, depression, PTSD. What do you do for yourself that seems to work to help that?
When I first joined the department, they said, keep your friends that don't work for the state. And I think basically what they're trying to say is present yourself in an environment where your petri dish where you are isn't just the job and the stress of that job. Because when you do shift work, it ends up being easier to hang out with people who on the same shift. When we were working third watch 2 to 10, we'd all get off at 10, late 20 something single guys, we'd all go out. So we'd all go out and have drinks. And of course we talk about what we did that day at work, and everything was just the job, the work, the mentality stayed the same. As far as stress, there's definitely the opportunity for alcoholism, because it's something that's not regulated. You're not allowed to only buy 6 beers, in part of our society. So the opportunity is there. And what else? All of those things that happen with that type of environment. I've seen officers, unfortunately, hearing about them that I've directly worked with commit suicide. There was an officer who, for whatever reason, was unhappy at home and with the job. He left his wallet, keys, and everything at the house. he took off, he left, and people were wondering, well, where's this guy at? He hasn't come to work. His wife hasn't found him. They called the police. They're looking for him. And it turned out that he committed suicide away from the home, out in some unincorporated area. And, he used that as an escape from his life. And, he felt it was just too bad, too negative to keep on going. And that was his out. A lot of people deal with it, not to that extreme, but dealing with alcoholism. When you're drunk, you're not in the moment and you're not dealing with the now and the whatever of your life. So it's a form of escape. And again, the thing about, mental health, not addressing the issues, kind of keeping it in the dark and just dealing with it by yourself, or not even dealing with it, period, in your relationships. So, divorce is a very high rate.
Yeah. Got a question from Renee. Is there any true rehabilitation happening? How large of a role do social systematic issues play in recidivism rates?
The inmates always say that, we come back to prison because we have no opportunities. Nobody wants to give us a shot. We can't vote. We can't, nobody wants to give us a job, this, that, and the other. I remember my mom working at an optometry office, and she was in the front office. And they ended up getting involved in a program where they took people who, there was a lady who was prior incarcerated, and basically an opportunity, a chance to go back to work, get back in the work stream, and not have it, their record count against them. So the lady was there. She was working as a receptionist. She was in charge of a small lockbox of the daily cash, and she ended up taking the money. So the police came, they arrested her. She was crying, she was yelling, I didn't do anything. It's these, fucking pigs, this and that. But the deal is, recidivism is a choice like stop smoking. If you really want to stop smoking, you're going to stop. If you're looking for excuses and reasons, or you just don't have the strength or will, then you go back to it. You see it in the prison, in the institution. An inmate's given an order, and out of fear of retaliation, he commits an assault that he didn't want to do because he was told to do it and didn't want to be assaulted himself. He had every opportunity to simply say, hey, you know what? I understand that these are the prison rules, but fuck those rules. I'm not the prison, I'm me, I'm doing my time. Don't involve me in your bullshit. He's going to get dealt with, but there's still the opportunity to say no. Yeah. And I think that's what we overlook. Recidivism, a lot of times they're looking at ways to poor me, help me out, simply to have more. I'm a drug addict, so I need to collect Social Security because it's a disability. And then instead of having to go rob and break into cars, they're using the disability money, the Social Security, to buy their drugs. And it's guaranteed every month. They don't have to risk going to prison by breaking into a car, stealing the stereo, or breaking into a house, or going to some abandoned building, ripping out all the copper tubing to sell to get that fix, hit that high, and to sustain themselves that way, because now the government's paying for their drug habit. So is that help, or is that simply taking advantage of the system? Which is it? So, it's a choice. And unfortunately, a lot of them aren't strong enough, don't make the choice to simply say, I'm going to better myself, I'm going to accept what that is, and do right. There's two things, there's either the why or the why not. Why climb Mount Everest? It's a death trap. Yet some people still go out there and do it. They do it for the sense of accomplishment. They do it for the thrill. But you have so many who say, nah, that's too damn hard. And that's the majority of people. And, I get it from the sense of a wild animal, a lion, a cheetah. They go to hunt. They're not successful in every hunt, but they need to hunt because there's no Safeway. There's no refrigerator. They either eat or they starve to death and die, or they get weak and get preyed upon by another predator. So they go, they do what they do, and that's how they survive, by doing. And then that's the why not. Then you have the why. That's, nah. And going back to the predator, they have to conserve their energy to be successful. They can't just do crap willy-nilly, be tired, and then can't hunt. You just set yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
But we as human beings do that. We waste our energy. And then we look for ways of why versus why not go do that.
Yeah.
There was a small metal 3-door cabinet, kind of like a school locker, but really small, in the sergeant's office where I was first assigned to. And I think it was red because it used to have medical PPE, personal protective environment kits. It had since been just had trash in it. So I took it, I cleaned it out, and I put a locker on it. I put, my shift was a third watch, and put a lock on it, and I stored some personal stuff in there. And the other sergeant came in, who was a regular there for a long time, and said, "Hey, well, what about me? What about second watch?" And I said, "Dude, you've been in this position for 5 years as this sergeant on this facility in this office. I'm the one who cleaned this shit out and organized it. And you're asking, what about you? Am I, as a new sergeant, was this a novel idea? Did I invent the first mousetrap? Is that what you're telling me?" So there you have the why, and then the why not. And the segment of population that's incarcerated are the why. Why should I do this? Why shouldn't I do that? And a lot of the more and more that you give them is the more and more that they'll take, but you're not necessarily creating a difference in recidivism.
Yeah. We're getting pretty close to the 3-hour mark, and there's still a lot of questions. So
keep them rolling. I'll go quick.
Well, yeah, that we're gonna have to fly through these. Unfortunately, even as you're talking, I think of more questions, and I'm like, shit. Okay.
2-part series.
We may have to. Emmett asks, should we really be giving these inmates, weights to get yoked on?
Well, that changed. They pulled all the weights from the system and instead made like a little circuit of cardio type work and dip bars and stuff so they can still maintain a certain level of physical fitness. And I think that in and of itself isn't about them being yoked or making them more of a challenge to deal with if they're fit. It's an issue of health. If they're healthy, they're not going to cost a lot of money in medical. They're not going to be like the older inmates. As people are living longer with the quality of medical care and the advancement in the sciences, so our older inmate population as well. And now they're requiring a lot of medical care, a lot. And all of that is money. It's nothing's free.
Yep. Question from Quan. I'm going to change. I think he thought he's asking from a parolee officer perspective, but I'm going to change it and say, because his second part of his question is about Hollywood's conceived ideas. So is there anything that you see common in Hollywood that you really dislike the way they portray prisons?
I love that question. That's something that hits home with me. I think before there was a show that's popular is Orange is the New Black with female inmates in a jail setting, a minimum custody type setting, is the fact that the architecture wasn't true to form. They didn't really show how it really is in prison as far as the cells and how everything is. They kind of just made things up because, let's face it, it's drama. They have to draw you in with the spectacular. And, that's not exactly prison. Prison isn't spectacular. It's different. It's dangerous and other stuff, but it's not spectacular. It's not drama in that sense. So I've always felt like it was truly never depicted correctly in TV or in the movies. And, you can't, I gave you those YouTube videos, that page of YouTube videos of seeing riots and stuff on the yard.
Yeah.
There's the perception of what that is, like in the movies, but then when you see it in real life, it takes a whole new different tone because like, hey, that's real. I'm really watching this happen. It's not doctored up. It's not what they're trying to portray, whether quickly get the message through emotionally on TV because the amount of time that they have to do it in, or on a movie and make it spectacular so that you're entertained. This is real life violence.
Yeah.
So, I think nothing is truly portrayed into the public of what it's really like in there, the environment. And
Gotcha.
I really don't know how to do that unless somebody was actually there to experience that, to be caught in the middle of a yard going down with a riot, or, witnessing an assault and stuff of that nature.
Yeah.
It's like a very popular show, Breaking Bad. Everybody loved that show because everybody wants to be gangster. Everybody wants to be, Wild West, John Wayne, Billy the Kid. They want to not follow the rules. They want to not be told. They want to have the freedom to do whatever, whenever. But they also, what they don't realize and admit to themselves, they want to do it without consequence.
Yep.
Why
exactly.
don't people dive every day flooring out, their speed and just driving till the tachometer hits the red? Because they know at some point in time they're going to get busted, and they don't want to get busted.
Yep.
But they'll watch that show. They'll associate with Sons of Anarchy and all this other stuff because everybody wants to be a savage until it comes time to do some savage shit.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's, well, that's not me anymore. I don't want to get that vested. I don't want to commit violence. I don't want to be liable. So everybody wants to be a gangster till it comes time to fucking rack that round and get to popping. Then it's like, oh, my ticket in Disneyland, I'm done now. Can I get off the ride? And I think that's what we have when depicting the real life of what it's like in an institution versus the portrayal of it.
Yeah.
For entertainment.
Is there any documentary series or TV show or anything that depicts it at least is there one that depicts it the best? Even though it sounds like there's none.
There was one Locked Up Overseas.
Locked Up Overseas, okay.
That shows actual prisons and the environment that inmates are in other facilities in other countries.
Yeah.
And there's also, I think, Dateline did a series, and I think Calipatria State Prison was involved with that. And a lot of the officers in that one, I directly worked with.
Yeah. My wife asked, what prisoner jobs are there?
Prisoner jobs, as far as jobs for inmates, there's plenty. You have housing unit porters, which is basically janitors within the housing unit. You have inmates that work on the yard crew, which is basically gardeners on the facility. And then you have inmates that go into education for the different level of classes that are given. And then you have inmates that work in the canteen and in laundry that end up sorting and passing out the clothes on the facility as they exchange clothes, dirty for clean, or get their monthly trip to the canteen to purchase goods off their inmate trust accounts, where they're not allowed to directly handle money. So the money is deposited into those trust accounts, and then they're able to keep a tallying score of what they have and how much they can spend. And then also inmates who work in the culinary, kitchen workers that cook the food and serve the food. And then you also have on the facility work change that processes inmates to the back of the facility in a separate area. And those can have other more mainstream, John Q. Public type of jobs like woodworking, paint crew, cabinet making and stuff of that nature. Auto body, car shop stuff.
What are your thoughts on the concept of prisons becoming essentially holding tanks for the mentally ill, chronically homeless, and poor?
They say that if you want to look at a society, you look to its prisons and you look to its dumps. And you see in a dump their trash, how they utilize their resources, and in prison, how they regulate their population. I think that's true, but everybody is looking to scapegoat. Like, how many people are homeless intentionally? How many people, do you hold the homeless accountable for intentionally wanting to be homeless? There's a lot of people with mental health issues who are homeless. Because of the mental health issues, they self-medicate with drugs. and alcoholism. And, you know, a lot of times you have people that just go off the wagon taking their meds, and then, man, they're really out there on a loop. But the whole deal is they have the responsibility to take their meds. And it's almost like we deal with them like they're 1 year old. They don't know any better. They're not children, they're adults. They had a lifetime of making choices and dealing with the repercussions of those choices. And now, as far as poor, like I said, you know, you have people from the hood actually go to college on a scholarship, make it out, get a job, become doctors. Is it impossible? No, they prove that it's not impossible. And it's because of them that you know, it's not 100% that you have to be a gangbanger, that you have to be a criminal. No, those are people making the conscious choice to go the easy route, always having an excuse. Mental health is being addressed in the institution, but how many people are inviting them into their homes? How many people are taking responsibilities? It's like, and this is kind of a topic that can be viewed critically, is the church and their stance on abortion. You know, every life is a life, and every life is deserved to live. And it's like, okay, that's understandable, but what about the responsibility of making that decision? How many church paid for orphanages do we have? How many, when we talk about immigration, how many people are housing immigrants in their house and paying for their health care and their food and their education? Everybody likes to make choices with other people's money. Everybody likes to talk about themselves in the mirror like, oh, I'm a good person. Look at my higher level conscience, the choices that I make. Life isn't that upper level. It's nitty gritty. You know, money's where your mouth is, where your door's open. No, everybody has their door locked because everybody's scared. And they're not going to put their neck out.
Yeah.
That's not something people do.
I think you answered this next question, but I'll just ask it and you could say skip or just whatever if you want to add anything to it. How do you as a correctional officer feel about the recidivism rate?
The recidivism rate, I think, is changing. I think that right now they use COVID as an opportunity to cite people and leave them in the public, which is endangering the public. There's no more easier place to quarantine than in an institution. You know, where are you going to go? You know, who are you going to have contact with? You know, when they set up these additional medical treatment facilities, these tent cities for COVID treatment, you know, basically they're creating a mini prison. So what they're doing is saying, I'm not going to pay for these guys. Let them stay in the street. And if they don't change and they do what they're going to do, then they're continually creating victims of the populace. I'll just appear in court, you know, 3 weeks from now. So they're not being kept away from the public that they vandalize and terrorize. So recidivism, it comes back a lot to, you're right, there's not a lot of opportunities, but there's not a lot of opportunities right now for people on the streets who aren't criminals.
Yeah.
And I've actually dealt with people who come back to prison because they're homeless, and prison gives them their structure. There's 3 hots and a cot, what they call it, you know, meals and a roof over their head. There's medical care. One guy came back because he needed a bridge and a bunch of dental work done, and he had no health care coverage. I know, you look at it and you laugh and you think it's incredible, but this is real life shit.
Mm-hmm.
Have and not have. I'm out in the streets, I don't have. You know, do I go sleep in a park? What am I going to go do? That's real life shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Or if I go to prison, and I've been there before, I already know the structure, and I know that they're going to give me. If I need glasses, they're going to pay $200 for my glasses. If I need $30 of dental work, John Q. Public, thank you, cha-ching, I'm indigent, and I just got $30,000 worth of work for free.
Yeah. All right, we still got 10 more questions, so you're going to have to try to go like one sentence each. Unfortunately, this sucks. We may have to try to do a part 2, I don't know. What do you think could be done while people are incarcerated to help prevent it?
That's a very hard question, because it's not like a stigmatism where the stigma of you come out of prison and you're a prisoner, you're a bad person, we don't want to give you a job. While in prison, they have their own set of rules as far as inmate politics. And you'd actually have to break that. You'd have to break the fact that gangbangers and their gangbang mentality, and if they're drug addicted, the drug use, and I don't see a way of doing that.
Yeah.
Nobody in power has ever given up power. No career politician has ever said, well, you know what? Let's just do one-term time limits and let's not get a pension from it.
Yeah.
Nobody who has ever wants to give it up.
Yep.
So to break the inmate politics in there, as far as the gangs, the gang mentality, and all that other stuff, I don't see a way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Next question. What impact would increased focus on mental health care for lower income people and families have on recidivism?
There is a lot of, like I said, mental health care has stepped up, and it's not just about the poor. They're giving that to any inmates that are incarcerated and that there's a need. If they're tested and found that they're in need, whether they're enhanced outpatient or triple CMS, they're given groups, they're given group therapy, one-on-one therapy, and all that other stuff. The deal is that there's no such thing as that one movie, the older movie where they had the challenged big guy was traveling with another guy and they gave him a rabbit. And he pet the rabbit, George, I like the rabbit. And he pet the rabbit so hard he snapped its neck. You don't know if you know that old movie?
No, I don't, no.
But so basically, it was an older movie where, a guy was traveling with another guy who, mental development issues, and he was a big powerhouse, but, would get scared and do damaging things. That's not what you have in prison. In prison, you have full functioning adults who are dysfunctional, and the choices that they make from that.
Yeah.
You can help them. Let's like saying, okay, you have a child molester. He molests 7 kids a year. You put him through therapy. He took that 7 and dropped it down to 3. You helped him a lot. You helped 4 children not get molested per year. And you helped him lessen what he does. But is that a cure? Is it a fix? If he's still a child molester and he went down from molesting 7 kids a year to 3 per year. And that's what you're really looking at.
What habits do you have that greatly impact your life?
Oof. That's negative and positive. My negative habits have directly impacted my life. Working shift work and having a unhealthy diet has given me diabetes. And not trying to balance that with the time that I have not away from work with a proper diet and then physical fitness. That has definitely had an impact on my health. There were definitely times where I shouldn't have had that many drinks to have that evening type of situations. So definitely there's good habits and bad habits. Some of the good ones are the fact that I'm now, I had a buddy of mine do that Tony Robbins thing, and I was able to talk to him and kind of glean some of that information. And the thing is that in life, it's not over. Every day is a blessing, and every day you have the opportunity to change. Just like the baby steps took you down negatively by bad habits, you can take those baby steps positive with good habits. See where you did things not necessarily wrong, but different, and the outcomes of it, where you wanted something and you wanted it emotionally, not factually, and you didn't realize that was harmful. So you changed it back to, hey, you know what? Now that I'm more self-aware, that behavior isn't that great. Let me work towards being a better me, and let me take those baby steps towards something positive.
Yeah.
And it's just that self-awareness and realizing, separating emotion from fact.
What's your favorite Vietnamese dish?
Pho. I think pho was some of my first time eating Vietnamese, but I have to balance it out. I got a top 3. Vietnamese coffee is incredible. It's
yes.
Vietnamese coffee has, if done right, tastes just like liquefied chocolate cake. Decadent, rich, sweet, but it comes back like a left hook. Tyson with that caffeine buzz, boom! You get your motor running. So the Vietnamese coffee, spring rolls, and pho, and man, I'm good.
Was Cafe Hapa the first time you had Vietnamese coffee?
No, I had it before.
Okay.
But I definitely enjoyed that there at Cafe Hapa.
Okay, I'll try to make these next two questions easier. Just answer with a lot, a little, or none. How much do you know of cryptocurrency?
None.
Are you, yes or no, are you for cryptocurrency? Or you could say maybe.
I don't know anything about it. I can't really comment.
Good. What is the biggest national or global problem for humans? What should we do to fix it?
I think that someone could say, potable water or food. But what I really think about it is that the mentality. We don't take ownership. The mayor of Compton said, if you really want to deal with inner city youth, become a mentor. Mentor these troubled children. You took away stuff like home ec in schools. I think we need to have a mental health and home ec type of deal in the lives of young adults. Because as adults, we're already adults. It's hard to change. And some of us don't want to change. So I think understanding and being able to separate emotion from fact and the way that those baby steps can either bring you up or bring you down. And then also we went to social media, we went to video games. At first, the teacher had to become the parent. And now we want the TV and Xbox and PS4 to be the parent. And now the adults aren't engaging in the work that it takes to raise children. Our lives have become more demanding in our careers. And as such, we've taken less responsibility in raising children. And that window, that gap is only going to get worse. We need to bring something like home ec type of deal of how to live your life instead of not knowing. You need to know, like millennials here, open up the soda can. Well, how do you open it? Here, use this rotary phone.
Yeah.
What the hell is that? It spins in a circle. What are you doing here? Teach them sustainable life skills for a higher quality of life, followed with mental health, so that they can be trained to live well, live better. And if you do that to all the youth, then every year, every generation, it's going to step up and up and up.
Yep.
And we've gotten away from that. And we see the results.
Last question, and I think this one's kind of funny. Emmett asked, if I go to jail, do I have to join a race gang?
There's pros and cons. If he joins, he has a protection of the group, but he has to follow the group rules. If he does not join, he has to deal with being ostracized and of not having strength in numbers. He basically just has to defend himself and do his time on his own, which will mean, the smallest kid gets picked on. So as an individual, he may or might not, have to deal with bullying in the institution.
Yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, no worries. I enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I kind of think there was more we could have got into, but
man, I remember hearing some of your other more graphic stories back in Cafe Hapa days. I kind of think we should maybe dive in and do a part 2 where it's as graphic as you want to get. Whether that's, I think that's aspects that maybe people, I think, could or should hear about it, depending on the story, the morals behind all of it.
I went really politically correct because I didn't want to put other officers' names out there or violate, HIPAA violations for medical issues of dealing with individuals.
Yeah.
But definitely what this ties into also is getting more graphic, would be portraying the real picture of what it's like in there.
Yeah.
Versus perception. Kind of like Hollywood versus reality. So,
yeah. It was good catching up, man. Let's try to schedule a part 2 if you want.
Definitely.